There was a recent announcement at the PlayStation Showcase for a game that I think has the potential to completely shake up the gaming industry a second time. It's called Marathon. It's out by a studio that has a proven track record of innovating in every single game they have ever made. And I'm here to tell you why that matters and the impact that this game is going to have on the world of video games as we know them. My name's Max Neal, and this is Voxel. To be honest, the trailer for Marathon snuck past me. It aired during the PlayStation Showcase in May 2023 at the same time that I was sitting in court as a member of a jury on a murder case. No cap, it has been a hard week. Anyway, the announcement highlighted Bungie's new extraction PvP shooter, Marathon. And while it didn't show us wait a minute, new? Why does that name sound so familiar? Oh, that's right. It's because Marathon isn't new at all. In fact, Marathon is a 30-year-old IP and one of the first games that Bungie Studios ever released. And not only does the original game mark a particularly important moment in the history of Bungie as a company, it was also one of the most innovative and important games ever made. See, prior to Marathon back in 1993, we were living in the equivalent of the Stone Age of gaming. Computer games were almost exclusively controlled with just the keyboard, and for FPSs, that meant moving with the arrow keys and aiming with WASD. At the time, this was totally normal. Then in 1994, out of nowhere, along come these 7 nerds looking to make their name in the video game industry. And they dropped what my grandma assumed was a game featuring high-performance athletes and their race to the finish. But you're wrong, Grandma. It's about shooting aliens.
Oh.
Marathon was a first-person shooter set in a sci-fi universe, where the player wakes up from cryosleep to find their ship under attack from aliens who have boarded and wiped out most of the crew. You gear up to take down the alien threat while the ship's onboard AI provides some context to the recent events unfolding around you. Oh, I'm sorry. Does this all sound familiar? Marathon, in many ways, was the spiritual predecessor to Halo, which Bungie would release less than 10 years later. And Marathon at the time was a major commercial success for the studio. It sold over 100,000 copies before its sequel came out, which was 10 times more copies than Bungie's previous game, Pathways. Grandma, stop! But Marathon was an innovation in the computer gaming world because it was the first-person shooter where you could control your character's aim not with the keyboard, but by using your mouse. Goodbye, clunky keyboard controls! Hello, smooth and sexy ball wheel controls. Okay, you still need the keyboard. No. But it was at this moment in history when the mouse and keyboard control scheme would be enshrined in the world of video games. Then, a few years later, Bungie would go on to make Halo, which was an even more massively successful release in its own right. But something often forgotten is that Halo was an innovation in the FPS gamepad controls. Just look at the games that released around the same time, like Medal of Honor. Shooting was bound to the X button on the controller. In Grand Theft Auto 3, shooting was bound to the circle button. Oh, it's disgusting. Halo was the game that popularized shooting being bound to the right trigger button, and that might seem small, but this became an industry standard. I am fascinated by these moments because they represent huge cultural milestones. And we can see the effect of Bungie's innovative control scheme on every modern first-person game released today. And that is really neat. Now, fast forward to May 24th, 2023, and what do we see? Some mushrooms, little baby worm robots, the Bungie logo. Oh my god, he's actually running a marathon, Grandma. Don't start with me. A derelict spaceship, of course, this is Bungie, and boom, the title screen. Is it a reboot? Is it a sequel? Are they just pulling another Modern Warfare? We don't know for sure, but it is a big deal, and one of the most exciting announcements in the past several years for 3 main reasons. Reason number 1, we know Marathon is going to be a competitive extraction shooter like Escape from Tarkov. If you're unfamiliar with the genre, that means that each round of gameplay has you drop into a map with other players who are playing against you, and only 1 life. You scavenge for loot and equipment you either find in the world or you take from your opponents, and then you extract with that loot or lose it if you're killed. If you get out, then you can drop in again with the loot you grabbed from previous matches, or if you're like me and get absolutely murked over and over again, you can rage quit and uninstall the game. I'm not salty, you're salty. Now, the extraction shooter genre was only really popularized in the past few years. It's relatively new, so we're finally starting to see major publishers responding to it. These kinds of trends, sandbox survival games and MOBAs, roguelikes, extraction shooters, they're often started in the indie game space and then over time get adopted by larger developers and publishing teams. Just look at how PUBG popularized the battle royale genre, only for Fortnite and Warzone to come in with tens of millions of dollars in budget to iterate on the genre in various ways. I am so excited to see Bungie's answer to Escape from Tarkov and similar games, and given their record of bringing innovation with them to every game they've created, it's even more exciting to see how they might innovate shooters even further. That's not to say that AAA games are inherently better than indies, but I'm psyched to see what a bigger studio with greater resources and a long history can bring to the table. Now that brings me to reason number 2 to be excited for Marathon. Whether you're a frequent player of shooters or you can't stand them at all, we all get to witness a 30-year evolution of a studio that has been entrenched in a single genre. Bungie is as synonymous with shooters as the completionist is with receiving golden poop as a reward for hours of mind-numbing work. Just look at how simple games from the 90s look compared to what we play today. We've seen incredible advances in the technology and the philosophy of games, but it's rare to be able to follow the path of a single studio over the length of time that Bungie has stuck around. I don't necessarily expect Marathon to be a genre-defining moment for extraction shooters exactly, but it will stand as a monument for the dedication that Bungie has brought to the shooter genre as a whole, and that's really, really cool. No doubt that the studio has had its ups and its downs, just like all of us have. And in that same way, all of us have that one thing that has stuck with us for as long as we can remember. Maybe you learned how to play an instrument when you were younger, and you still find yourself playing that today. Maybe you had a teacher who encouraged you to turn your passion into a career that you've continued. Or maybe, like probably most of you played that one game that you can never forget. That game that changed the way you look at all of the games that came before it, perhaps even after it. Maybe even changed the way you look at the world around you. So perhaps the reason why I'm so excited about this announcement is that for Bungie, that game, seems to be Marathon. You can see how beloved it is by the team. The game was original proof that Bungie was doing what it should be doing, making great shooters. You see it in the ways that it inspired Bungie's future games. You even see it in the Easter eggs hidden in those games throughout the 30-year history of Bungie as a company, how even Marathon's original logo is imprinted in those games since. Marathon will be Bungie's first game since it parted ways with Activision Blizzard back in 2019, which is exciting in its own right. And in these ways, you can see that Marathon is the game that Bungie wanted to make all along. Like the studio never quite let go of the game that made it. There's no doubt that reviving the IP was a careful and deliberate decision, and with something so precious, I can only imagine the pressure placed on the team at Bungie to really get it right. Pressure alone isn't going to get them there, and Bungie hasn't always gotten it right away. But no one can deny that they've created some of the most memorable worlds and experiences in gaming, and introduced some of the most incredible, innovative changes to gaming as a whole. Marathon represents 30 years of innovation, 30 years of incredible dedication, 30 years of derelict ships. And I have this faith in the team to pull out something really unique, something that will leave another mark on the history of gaming. Or, the game could just be Is that how we're ending it?